Exchange Commission, for example, has a very clear remit to ensure fair and efficient markets and to protect investors. We're very, very lucky today to be joined by the former Commissioner of the US Securities and Exchange Commission to discuss exactly these issues and the prospects for mainstream adoption. Paul Atkins.
Well, thank you, Rod. It's great to be here with you today. Thank you.
We're really, really privileged and pleased you've been able to join us here at the Cardano Virtual Summit. We'll go straight into the questions, Paul. And let's come straight to the point. What are current US governmental attitudes to blockchain?
Well, I think they vary all over the place because we have not just the federal government in our system, but we have 50 states and then territories and that sort of thing. So it's safe to say that there are a lot of different attitudes, and it also depends. So within a governmental structure, like at the federal government level, it depends on the agency. And so, for example, ones that are more focused on potential criminality have one particular point of view. Others might be more focused on market issues or entrepreneurship. And then the same with respect to the 50 states. To go, from it's just like around the world, you have a lot of different attitudes. So, and those are also evolving as time goes on. So, as people learn, as situations change, we have this epidemic, worldwide epidemic, and whatnot. So, all of these things come into play. So, what might pertain today might not pertain tomorrow or 2 years from now.
Sure. And moving away from governmental attitudes, I think lots of people would know, particularly given your experience as former commissioner of the SEC, what's your personal attitude towards blockchain technology now?
Well, I've always been one to support entrepreneurship and innovation, and to have government get out of the way of people who are trying to come up with market-oriented solutions to various problems. So unless you have a real market failure, the government basically should stay out of the situation and then allow human ingenuity to come up with solutions. And so I was commissioner at the SEC from 2002 until 2008, and in the incredible feat of market timing, I left the SEC 6 weeks before Lehman unfortunately went under. And of course, there were a lot of rumblings and problems leading up to that. And then after that, I was on a group called the Congressional Oversight Panel for the Troubled Asset Relief program, TARP. And so I was involved in a lot of the issues that came about after the financial crisis itself. So anyway, so out of that very sad period, which had a lot of dislocations, of course, that's when this whole idea of blockchain and Bitcoin and started to come about through the white paper, the famous white paper, and everything else. And at first, when people heard that back then, they poo-pooed it, if they had even heard it. A lot of people did. Other folks saw, a real promise to it. And so here we are now, 10 or so years later, and so Bitcoin has, of course, spawned lots of other types of cryptocurrencies out there, and all sorts of ideas of people trying to think of ways, use cases to make the blockchain work, not just in finance, but in other things. So I think it's a very exciting time. You have even governments now buying into the idea. And so I think in the next 5 and 10 years, we'll see even more dramatic changes as things to build up.
You say that people are rapidly developing various use cases for blockchain. Is that the route to adoption?
Well, I think so, because a lot of people still view Bitcoin a bit as a plaything. And sure, there are uses in commerce, potentially, that hasn't actually picked up so much yet, but just because of the infrastructure issues and things like that inherent to Bitcoin. But of course, other people are trying to come up with other solutions for the payments issues and things like that. So all that's very exciting, and maybe will live up to be an international type of infrastructure that will actually take root and make international commerce much more efficient and less prone to problems that might come up because of the inherent openness of the blockchain and the distributed ledger concept. So that part, I think, is very exciting and has a lot of potential in commerce, but we're seeing even more in other areas. And I mentioned the current epidemic that we have. And if you look at how necessity is the mother of innovation, and so you never know what's going to come out of problems like this, and how people in the medical area, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, whatever, the whole supply chain, whether it be masks or whatever else that we have a shortage of, isopropyl alcohol, or toilet paper, that we've seen, on an international scale. So those sorts of things, I can see how in the future, blockchain will be able to help and may be able to prevent shortages, because the whole essence of a market economy versus a central planned economy is how do you pick up on all of the signals coming from the billions of buyers and potential buyers and their demands. How does that send signals out to the suppliers and manufacturers, distributors, and all of that to get the right product to the right place at the right time? And so I think the use cases that are inherent in an idea like blockchain, I think, are pretty exciting. And so I think we haven't begun to even explore all of those particular solutions yet.
Okay. And moving more specifically to cryptocurrencies themselves, what do you think the future holds? Do you think we're moving slowly or perhaps even quickly toward a situation where traditional fiat currencies and cryptocurrencies will coexist? Do you think that potentially we'll have a situation where that becomes the norm, or that possibly digital forms of currency will themselves completely overtake traditional fiat currency?
Well, we'll see. That's the big question. And on that hinges, the value of Bitcoin and everything else, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I think in reality they do coexist already, because you have between Ether, Bitcoin, and other crypto assets. You also have other private things that are being developed, especially on the payment side, and so that, and then you have other electronic payments platforms like Venmo or whatever, and then in China, WeChat, how that has taken off over there. So China itself is pretty much already basically a cashless society, and how that is changing. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how this advances, but it's going to really depend on the acceptance of these particular instruments or currencies by people in real life. So, from the corner drugstore to the big box store to, something like on eBay, if you're ordering something from one country and trying to get it from the next, PayPal's trying to fill that particular situation now, but you still have inefficiencies of currency translation and all of that. So that's the promise of a truly international type of cryptocurrency, and that would be developed independently of governments and for the libertarian's dream, I guess we would be able to say that. So I think it's going to come down to acceptance by individuals and overall, and how well those particular assets and the infrastructure around those assets can meet the needs of people in a frictionless, as seamlessly and frictionlessly as possible, and without a lot of worry about valuation fluctuations, which is, of course, an issue for the merchant who's selling you something and worried about what it might be worth the next minute after you walk out of the store. So all of those things, obviously are big issues that have to be worked out. And then you have the issue of governments as they, kind of eye these, potential central bank digital currencies, which I think is pretty much of a fiat currency, obviously, basically. But depending on the country and the regime and whether or not it's demanded that be legal tender and nothing else, I think will have a big effect. And then basically how possible it would be to get around those sorts of rules and interdictions that might be imposed on electronic transfer and the internet and that sort of thing. So that's very much of a future issue, but we're rapidly approaching that sort of decision point and it's not necessarily for authorities, but it's also for real people. So whether or not they give up their gold and go to something else, it'll be interesting to see.
You say that the success of cryptocurrencies relies on adoption by ordinary people, either organically or potentially through compulsion, through legislation, as we're likely to see in some jurisdictions. What's your view of Facebook's Libra project? Is it possible that could be a Trojan horse that really introduces mass adoption and legitimizes the idea of cryptocurrencies?
Could be. I mean, of course, that's what I think. Not that I've talked to them, but I think that's what the folks at Facebook probably were hoping for as far as rolling out this idea. They have so many users of their platform through all sorts of countries, and especially in countries that don't have strong currencies and that have suffered from huge inflation and manipulation by kleptocratic regime that rules over the people. So that's I think that's a good a potential, obviously, use case for what Facebook proposed. But the way I guess they will probably even admit themselves that the rollout could have been better as they did it, and they could have kind of prepared people better. It's funny. I had heard that in China, that Chinese government people were thinking that this is a plot by the U.S. government to get hegemony of the United States dollar everywhere and to undermine what's going on in China. Whereas here in the United States, from our government's perspective, at least some people in the government, the similar view was, but kind of flip, like, oh my gosh, this is a way of undermining the U.S. dollar and its position in the world, with respect to commerce, because it does play a very important role for international trade. So those sorts of things, are helped to, I think, derail at least Libra initiative, at the beginning. And so, to their credit, the people at Facebook have kind of refigured and rethought their approach, and are still apparently in the process of evolving a way of maybe pursuing this particular goal in a different way. And so, may 1,000 flowers bloom or whatever, as far as and let the best type of product win at the end of the day, that gets good traction, good adherence, and people who put it to use and better their lives. Because obviously, if it doesn't better their lives, they're not going to really be willing to use it. And if it doesn't make things easier, less costly, and that sort of thing. So, so a lot of answers have to be, have to come forth with respect to the questions that are being posed about whether it be Libra or whatever they want to call it in the future, and other sorts of crypto assets.
Okay. Given your experience and expertise, it would be wrong not to ask you about the state of Wyoming and your view on the extensive pro-blockchain regulation and legislation that's been passed in that state. So what's your view on what's the experiment that we've seen in recent years in Wyoming? And do you think there's potential for that to be replicated in other states?
Well, so that's a great example of, in the United States, our federal system of government, because, this is an international audience that we have here today, but, we have a federal government that's governed by a constitution, and and so we have 50 states that are sovereign states, making up the United States. And so they have delegated, what's not delegated to the federal government is left to the states and the people to figure out. And so the states have wide latitude over lots of things to figure out. And so this is an example of one of our state governments taking a step forward and seeing an opportunity. Wyoming is out in the Rocky Mountains, out in the western part of the United States. It's a fairly large state territory-wise, but as far as population goes, it's not one of the most populous states. So here they have a good sense of individuality out there, and so they've approached this particular statute in that sort of spirit of individualism and to encourage entrepreneurship. So they've come up with an extensive framework with respect to crypto assets and blockchain. And we have a speaker here at this conference, Caitlin Long, who's has already or is about to speak on it. But she was involved apparently with the drafting and passage of the statute. So I think the various aspects of that, recognizing direct property rights of holders of crypto assets, and that would be upheld by Wyoming courts. Coming up with a sandbox, for where people can experiment and without real fear of getting thrown into jail or whatever, within parameters there. And then we're even going so far as to approaching the whole question of depository institutions, financial institutions that would be able to service these cryptocurrencies. And then a very important question of providing custodianship, which is what institutional investors really need to have to be able to fulfill their fiduciary duties to their investors. So all of this is a very, I think a well thought out framework that they've put together in Wyoming. And we have a lot of examples of that over history in the United States of how the state governments are great incubators of new ideas and and here again, just like in the real world where you have competition between people and how the competition helps to, develop ideas and improve things, because bad ideas will not really get any traction and fall off the way side, or and good ideas will get adherence and then investors and that sort of thing. So the same thing with respect to regulatory frameworks, and as far as like where corporations in the United States decide to have their situs, where they become have their registration. And so Delaware is one of the major states in the United States for that. So here, Wyoming could well become, a state where that attracts these sorts of companies. So, I wish them well. I hope that we'll see how, as people experiment with going to Wyoming and setting up their business and falling under their particular statute, how that takes off. Now, of course, the one thing about the internet is that it's global, and so you have to be aware, even though you fit under one particular rubric, you have to comply with other sorts of frameworks that are out there wherever you're doing business or wherever your customers or investors might be. So that's the other issue. But it's great that people are taking steps forward, that they're thinking innovatively, coming up with new ideas, and then that helps put pressure on other more reticent jurisdictions to answer that, because they have their own citizenry, they have their voters who want to know, well, why can't I do what my neighbor across the state line is able to do? And so that also over time does have a good effect.
Sure. Moving into the international arena, what's your view on China's rumored plans for a central bank digital currency, and also your view on central bank digital currencies in general?
Well, the People's Bank of China has recently even test run their digital yuan here recently. So that's looks to be up and running, and they have the advantage of being a centralized state to be able to impose whatever they decide to do on their people. Other countries are not set up that way. So we'll see, what comes of that. Obviously, they were driven a bit, apparently, by the announcement of Libra and what they were perceiving to be a threat against their currency. And then maybe they will have other ulterior motives as well with respect to their foreign policy and, how they are, overseeing their native population. So who knows, how that all goes. But when you have a central bank, this is basically a fiat currency just, being done in a digital format rather than, with banknotes or, electronic wire transfers. But still, it's the same aspect where the supply and demand of the currency is controlled by ultimately politicians who decide, how the monetary policy is to be pursued. So, maybe it's easier to do commerce that way with, that sort of digital currency, and maybe it's better for international wire transfers or not wire transfers, but just transfers through that, through the mechanism there of, the internet. But whether that makes such a big difference overall to normal people and to commerce and to get, part of, like I mentioned before, as far as the ultimate rationale behind Bitcoin was more of almost a libertarian type of aspect of getting currency out of the control over from central governments, sort of like a digital version of gold or something else, which of course gold can be manipulated as well. But I think that was the dream of the people who thought of about Bitcoin at the beginning. And so, where all that stands with a central bank type of run digital currency is completely different. So I think, we'll see how people accept it or not, where they have the freedom to accept it or not. But anyway, but it's always susceptible, I would think, to the political whims of the people who are running either the central bank or the central government that is in charge of the currency.
Okay. And it sounds as if you're essentially ambivalent about central bank digital currencies. Is that a fair comment?
Well, there may be, it may be more efficient. There may be efficiencies run out of that, and maybe it may be more efficient for the central bank then to look after money supply, because that's the one thing that, like in the United States, that the Federal Reserve has complained over the years that it doesn't have the way it used to back in the good old days, where they were able to, quote unquote, good old days, not that I think they were that good, but in that respect, but where they were able to control the interest rates and the money supply much more than they can now. So maybe that's one offshoot of a central bank currency. I haven't studied it enough to say that or not. But I think to me it's just an extension of a fiat currency, and it's not really anything that drastically new from what's being done in the past, except for perhaps the efficiencies and that sort of thing from it.
Right. Well, Paul, you've walked us through your opinions and shared your insights right the way from state level through to federal government and regulatory level in the US, right the way through to the international arena. I really want to thank you for joining us here at the Cardano Virtual Summit. It's been a real privilege. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Rod. Thank you very much for having me.